So again, we're on activity 19, the biofarming edible vaccines. We're actually going to do both 19 and 20 today. 19 doesn't take very long, and then 20 is a little bit more. It'll take about half the period. So again, the very first thing is you're going to draw in your notebook the summary and the activity. You can get to that here after you do the reading. So again, the other thing you're going to draw down there is the Kwl chart. We're actually going to start off with this. So give you a few minutes. Just write down some things. And what a Kwl chart is what do you know, and what do you want to know, and then what did you learn, okay? So at the very beginning, we're going to write down what do you know, and what we're looking at is genetically modified organisms. So what do you know about genetically modified organisms? Okay, so take about, let's say about 5 minutes to write down, go 3 to 4 different things, if you can write down 3 or 4 different things. If you get done with that, you can actually move on to the what do you want to know. And if you don't know anything you want to know about genetically modified organisms, flip through both 19 and 20 and look at the titles, look at the bold words, those kind of things, and that's a good clue to see what it is that you want to know. Because if you're looking at the titles, if you're looking at the subsections, those kind of things, and you're like, what, really? That would be something you want to know, okay? It might not be something you really want to know, but something you want to know enough to pass the class. Does that make sense? So again, you're going to write on the K, what do you know right now about genetically modified organisms? Okay. The W is going to be what do you want to know? And then the L we're going to fill at the very end is what did you learn about genetically modified organisms? Okay. What else do we know about genetically modified organisms? We know we can increase the ability or the efficiency of the crops or the food.
They're not always safe.
Okay. So they not always. Little side note, the term always, don't ever use it in biology, unless you put not always, and then you can use it. But you're like, plants always create their own food. Well, there's some plants that don't. We'll find plants that don't. Or all bacteria have this. Well, they don't all have that. But yeah. Okay, so some might not always be safe. What else? Think about some genetically modified case studies that y'all read about the salmon or the rice or whatever. Okay, so we can do genetically modification to change color. Okay. So one of the first case studies y'all read about was the aromatic rice, and there was aromatic rice that was drought resistant. There was aromatic rice that wasn't drought resistant, or sorry, flood resistant. Do it.
Was the corn genetically modified?
The corn itself, yeah.
It can be very beneficial.
Okay, so we can actually have benefits, right? There are benefits, but with every benefit, there's also a trade-off. And that would then be this whole, like, it's not always safe, but the benefit is that it does increase your ability. All right, so what are some things, some things that we want to know?
Edible
Okay.
vaccines.
So what? That was not good. I know. There you go. So edible. It's huge. What else?
It causes environment issues.
Okay. So what kind of environment issues do we have to worry about?
Like the fish or something.
Mm-hmm.
The types, like the strains of fish it can produce, I guess. Or like, I was reading about them yesterday about the salmon. I think they're easily a prey to other fish when they're young.
Because they don't know the difference between good and bad. Okay, good. You know the things y'all want to know. We're done.
The effects
Okay. So the effects
on the organisms.
of GMOs, and then also the effects of GMOs on other organisms.
Okay, so
Of
you know how like horses and
GMO.
donkeys can have like this other thing? No, but like a horse and a donkey can mate and have that, what do we call
Heavy
it?
mule.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
thing. Well, what if like you have a genetically modified horse or a donkey, and then they go and mate with a regular one? What happens?
Okay. Now, you know the mules are actually sterile, right?
So,
Sterile means they can't produce any more babies. So to make a new mule, you actually have to have a new donkey and a new horse. It's the same thing with a liger. A ligers and tigons are actually sterile as well. They have magical powers. And so percent of time fatal. Good. Good job. All right, cool. So those are the things we want to know. Those are the things we know. We know that they increase the efficiency or the ability of the organism we're modifying. They might not always be safe. We can do things like changing the color, changing the benefit of it, changing the aromaticity of it, whatever it is. But there's also benefits. But with those benefits, it becomes trade-offs. And then we're going to look at see what are the edible vaccines, the environmental issues, and the effects of GMOs, as well as the effects of GMO organisms on non-GMOs. And then finally, what's the percent of the time that it's actually fatal? So if you follow along, excuse me. So if you're following along in your book, we're actually on step 3 on the procedure on page 394. So the first thing said, here's the cards. So spread them out, and you're going to figure it out. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to take these cards, you're going to sequence these cards, try to figure out what order these cards are supposed to be in, okay? Do not fill out the chart yet, because what you're going to do is you're going to sequence the cards based on what you think should be, okay? So what order should these cards be in? Okay, now, what are these cards about? Obviously, this is genetic modification of lettuce. But on the back, what is it showing? What are the pictures looking like?
blue and black.
Yes, they're blue and black. But what is it doing? What are we using here?
Oh, it kind of looks like that parent. I mean,
Like
yeah, the family.
Maybe like a pedigree?
It's like,
Okay.
wait, no, because there's not two up there. One can do two.
modification process.
Okay, so the modification process. How do we make genetic things, right? So what about this picture right here? What about that picture right there?
Mr. Reed, what color did you think the dress was?
Alright, that picture right there, okay, that's card letter G, so y'all look at that one. Okay, where have you seen something like this? Where you've got DNA, okay, that's obviously DNA, it's double-stranded, it's twisted, and it's going into a cell. Where else have we looked at cards, there's specifically cards like this, that had DNA, and that DNA was injected into the cell, and then that cell took the DNA, and then was able to make more of that original DNA? Okay, for proteins, but more specifically with viruses. Remember the way the viruses attacked a cell? Right? Remember the virus would come and it would attach to that cell? It would eject its DNA into here, and it would also send its protein in there. And the virus would then take over that cell, and it would replicate the DNA using reverse transcriptase, and it would replicate the DNA. It would also take its DNA that was made and make more proteins. Okay? This is essentially how we're going to insert vaccines into things that we eat. So this is called genetically modified lettuce. But what is it talking about here? What kind of vaccine are we working on? Hep B, right? Hepatitis B is a vaccine you can get, and I want to say actually Hep C is the one they require you to get before you go into college. So wouldn't it be kind of cool if we could actually just have hepatitis vaccines? Instead of you go getting a shot, you just eat this lettuce and you're good to go. Throw a little ranch on there, your vaccines are so much better, right? A little honey mustard vaccine. It'd be awesome. Yeah, so that'd be kind of cool. That's like a benefit, but then there's got to be a trade-off for that. So what I want you to do is take those cards, figure out what order those cards are in, okay? And then the reading that starts right there where it says reading edible vaccine, it's going to walk you through the steps. So as you walk through the steps, you're gonna take those cards and basically reorder them. So what do you think the order is right now? So let me give you a little time. Go ahead and order those cards right now, and then we'll talk about where we're at. So don't read yet. Just try to figure out what steps need to go from here to here to here.
So you must believe to give your grades.
All right, so here is that sequence. Again, it's just up here. Kind of trippy, right? All right, so here's a sequence that that you're going to use to be able to function and to do basically gene modification. Okay, so that was the goal here. So go ahead and put your cards back up and bundle them up. Now,
What is this?
that's glue.
Well, I know, but like, what is this? Like, what is it?
So y'all go and flip on to the analysis questions, which are on page 399. Okay. So y'all just wrote these down, but on number 1, this is basically the steps of modification. So again, you take the gene out of a chunk of DNA, you put that gene, you take that gene, you make copies of that specific chunk of DNA. How do you get that gene into a bacteria or into another organism?
Gene.
What's it called? What's it called? Plasmid. And all a plasmid is basically just a circular chunk of a small chunk of DNA. Okay, so it's not the entire DNA, but it is a section of DNA. Okay, so that gene would be coded into that DNA. Okay, and so that bacteria then transfers that DNA into our organism we want, and then we grow from there. Okay, so tell me, and you can put these on your learn column or something like that. What are some trade-offs that we have to deal with when using genetically modified organisms? What do y'all say? I know. Say again?
Like non-natural something if you like use genetically modified corn.
Okay. So why would you want? What's the issue with that?
You like want natural stuff if you like a healthy one or something.
Okay. So it's not natural. So that's a trade-off. Okay. So uneven dosage, if it's a vaccine. Good, because that's pretty important, right? If we get too much, too little, then you're not going to be protected. You might get sick from it. What else? Does one gene recognize only one specific idea? Or can one gene also be in the middle of another gene that would actually be beneficial? Originally it was thought it was like one gene, one protein. But it's actually, if here's your DNA, okay?
One gene can do anything.
And here's a gene right here. Let's say this is gene A. And here's gene B. Well, gene A, part of gene A and part of gene B might be gene C. Okay? And let's say that gene C codes for sickle cell anemia, which causes your blood to look like that. Okay? If we take out code C, if we can take out gene C, we're like, yay, it's out, right? Well, doesn't that destroy gene A and gene B? Okay. So when we remove, when we have a removal of bad genes, that might remove good genes. Does that make sense? How that could happen? Because those genes don't. It's the same thing. Yeah, it's the same thing. So, like, if you had an allergic reaction to penicillin, and someone uses a gene from the penicillin mold in the development of Swiss cheese, you ate that Swiss cheese, there's a chance you could be allergic to Swiss cheese, not because of the cheese, but because of the penicillin that was in it. All right. Go and flip on to page, whatever activity 20 is, whatever page that is. Next page, 400. So this is the very last thing we're going to look at as far as genetics. And essentially the question is, are genetic modified organisms the solution? So take a look at that graph over there on 401. So you got two graphs there. Now, what's the first graph telling us? How does the number of bushels and the profit relate to crop diversity? What happens to the crop biodiversity? It's going way down, right? What does biodiversity mean? Different types, the different varieties of the soybean. Okay? So, why does the different varieties of soybean decrease the profits available and the number of bushels produced?
Because different types can produce
Different types could produce what?
different amounts. Like,
Well, if we have a low biodiversity, and let's say that a disease comes through and attacks the soybean crops, are there going to be a lot of soybean crops left over? No, because that biodiversity allows the soybean crops to survive specific types and another type not able to survive. Okay. Now,